You think being around people makes you stronger? It doesn't. Every room you enter steals a piece of you. Every conversation leaves something behind. Not words, but fragments of your attention, your originality, your quiet power. You call it connection, but it's not connection. It's consumption. A slow, invisible exchange where your focus, your individuality, your inner world are traded for noise. Look around you. Crowded parties, fake smiles, forced laughter that sounds more like static than joy. People talk not to understand, but to avoid silence, because silence reveals who they truly are, and most can't bear to face it. You tell yourself you're social to stay sane, but have you ever noticed how exhausted you feel afterward? How something inside you feels smaller, dimmer, after hours of pretending, nodding, agreeing? That isn't normal, that's erosion. Arthur Schopenhauer saw this centuries ago. He wrote that a man can be himself only so long as he is alone. He knew the truth society still refuses to admit. That constant socializing doesn't build the mind, it dulls it. It trains you to seek validation instead of depth, to perform instead of think. Because every group has a price, conformity. And the more you belong, the less you become. You weren't born to echo their thoughts. You were born to form your own. But every day you let them download their noise into you. Through conversation, through approval, through the endless urge to be seen. That's how society kills the independent mind. Not with chains, but with smiles. Not through control, but through comfort. So, ask yourself, when was the last time your mind was completely your own? When was the last time you sat in silence and felt the weight of your own thoughts, without the need to share them? In this video, you'll see what Schopenhauer saw, that the greatest threat to your mind isn't solitude, it's people. And I'll show you the mechanism, the silent, beautiful poison that slowly destroys you every time you choose to socialize. Every time you speak, you trade something. Not money, not time. Something far more valuable. A piece of your originality. You think a conversation is harmless, but it isn't. Each word you give away bends a little of who you are to fit the shape of whoever is listening. You begin to mirror them, their tone, their beliefs, their energy, until your edges fade. That's how erosion begins. Not with arguments, with imitation. Schopenhauer saw it clearly. He wrote that the more a man depends on society, the duller his mind becomes, because every crowd, every group, every conversation demands a compromise, a surrender of thought for the comfort of belonging. And you surrender more than you realize. You start laughing when others laugh, even when it isn't funny. You nod when you disagree, just to avoid conflict. You mimic their emotions to stay liked, their opinions to stay safe, their habits to stay seen. And slowly, you forget what you actually think. Modern psychology calls it social mimicry, your brain's default survival script. Mirror others to be accepted. Agree to be liked. Conform to be safe. But every time you do it, dopamine rewards you for your obedience. You feel comforted, not because you were true to yourself, but because you were accepted by others. That comfort is the drug. That drug is the problem, because the moment your brain links belonging to pleasure, you stop seeking truth. You start seeking approval, and approval is a leash disguised as validation. Schopenhauer believed solitude wasn't loneliness, it was purification. Because in solitude, imitation dies. You stop mimicking the noise around you and start hearing your own voice again. It's why thinkers like Nietzsche, Jung, and Da Vinci withdrew from the crowd. Not out of arrogance, but necessity. They understood that creativity doesn't survive exposure, it thrives in isolation. You can't think deeply when your mind is constantly adjusting itself to others. You can't hear your instincts when you're tuned to everyone else's frequency. Your focus scatters, your originality fades. You become a reflection of reflections, a mind built from borrowed fragments. This is the law of inner erosion, the truth that every interaction reshapes you, even when you think it doesn't. And if you never stop to rebuild yourself in solitude, you'll dissolve completely, a self worn away by smiles, words, and noise. You were never meant to be a social echo. You were meant to be an individual mind, sharp, untamed, and terrifyingly silent. They tell you that unity is strength, that belonging makes you safe, that being part of something bigger than yourself gives your life meaning. But they never tell you the cost, because the crowd doesn't want your individuality, it wants your obedience. It wants your silence dressed as agreement, your thoughts softened until they fit the pattern. The crowd is not a collection of minds, it's a machine, and its favorite fuel is your fear of standing alone. Schopenhauer wrote, "The more intelligent a man is, the more he suffers among others." He knew the truth that most will never face. The crowd doesn't hate you for being wrong, it hates you for being different. Look around, scroll through your feed. Everyone posts the same thoughts in slightly different words. Same opinions, same outrage, same slogans recycled until they lose meaning. It's not self-expression anymore, it's performance. A mass theater of approval, where the loudest actors win and the deepest thinkers disappear. The internet was meant to connect free minds. Instead, it became the largest crowd in human history. Billions screaming, mimicking, validating each other's noise. If you stay long enough, your mind starts syncing with theirs. You begin to speak their language. You start to crave their approval. And the more likes you get, the more your originality dies. That's the tyranny of the crowd. Not violence, but seduction. It doesn't chain you, it flatters you. It tells you you're part of something. And for a moment, you believe it. You forget that every great idea, every revolution, every breakthrough began in isolation. From Galileo to Nietzsche, from Jung to Tesla, all were ridiculed by their time, because the crowd has only one instinct, to destroy what it doesn't understand. The crowd thrives on sameness because sameness is predictable. Predictable people are easy to control. Easy to sell to, easy to silence. You think blending in is survival. It isn't. It's surrender. Because once you give the crowd what it wants, your opinion, your emotion, your approval, you no longer belong to yourself. You belong to them. And they will turn on you the moment you stop echoing them back. The tragedy is that most people will never notice it happening. They'll live their entire lives as reflections of a collective will that isn't theirs, convinced they're free while living inside a prison made of applause. You were never meant to think like everyone else. That's the point of having a mind. But if you let the crowd dictate your truth, you're not thinking anymore. You're participating in your own erasure, and that is how brilliance dies. Not in silence, but in noise. You smile when you don't feel it. You laugh when you're not amused. You nod when every cell in your body wants to disagree. And you call it being polite. But Schopenhauer had another word for it: exhaustion. He called it the exhaustion of self-preservation in the theater of others. Because that's what life becomes when you spend it performing. A stage play where every gesture is scripted, every emotion rehearsed, and every truth censored. You learn early that honesty makes people uncomfortable. That silence makes them suspicious. That truth, real, unfiltered truth, isolates you. So, you adapt. You learn to fake interest, to mimic warmth, to flatter just enough to be tolerated. And somewhere along the line, you stop noticing that you're acting. Every workplace, every online space, every friendship circle becomes a miniature court. A place where status depends on presentation, where flattery outweighs substance, and visibility replaces depth. Ancient kings were surrounded by courtiers trained in deceit, smiling, agreeing, praising, all while hiding contempt behind manners. You live among the same courtiers now, only they hide behind screens instead of silk robes. You post smiles you don't feel. You share opinions you barely believe. You measure your worth by reactions, not reflection. And at the end of the day, you collapse. Not because your body is tired, but because your mind is bleeding from constant self-editing. That's the quiet tragedy of sociability. It rewards masks, not minds. It trains you to be agreeable instead of authentic, visible instead of wise, charming instead of free. But here's the truth you were never told. Every fake smile costs you energy. Every moment of forced small talk drains your focus. Every time you hide your real thoughts to fit in, your inner world grows dimmer. You start forgetting how to speak without performing, how to feel without translating it into something digestible for others. And the longer you wear the mask, the harder it is to remember who you were before it. That's why silence feels so strange to most people, because in silence, the mask slips. And for the first time, you're forced to face the person underneath. the one who's been suffocating under layers of charm and compliance. It's not weakness to retreat from that performance, it's recovery. The world may call it antisocial, distant, cold, but Schopenhauer would call it freedom. Because freedom isn't found in being liked, it's found in no longer needing to pretend. Silence used to be the natural state of the mind. Now, it terrifies people. You can't sit for 5 seconds without checking something. Your phone, your messages, your feed, your reflection in the eyes of others. The moment silence begins, the noise calls you back. The noise of conversations, of scrolling, of endless connection. You think you're communicating, but you're really consuming. Every ping, every reply, every laugh reacts in your brain the same way sugar hits your tongue. Short pleasure, instant decay. Modern neuroscience explains it simply. Each notification, each like, each meaningless chat floods your brain with dopamine, the chemical of reward. It feels harmless, but repetition rewires your mind. You start craving stimulation instead of clarity, noise instead of thought. It's the same circuit that addicts rely on, the same one that gamblers, alcoholics, and compulsive eaters fall into. Except your addiction is invisible. It's disguised as being social. Schopenhauer saw it long before the science existed. He wrote that, "To be alone is the fate of all great minds, a curse only to the small ones." He understood that the crowd's noise is seductive precisely because it distracts you from yourself. It spares you from facing the vast, uncomfortable silence where real thought begins. But that silence, that emptiness you fear, is where your power hides. Because when the noise stops, the detox begins. Your brain stops chasing the next hit of validation. Your attention stops scattering like light in fog. And suddenly, ideas start to appear, slow, raw, original. The tragedy of this age is that people confuse stimulation with aliveness. They think constant motion means progress. But overstimulation kills depth the way sugar kills appetite. It keeps you full of nothing, always entertained, never fulfilled. You talk too much, text too much, think too little, and your mind, constantly interrupted, forgets how to go deep. You can't focus. You can't create. You can't even rest. You live in a constant state of half thinking, half existing. The noise has become your drug, and solitude, your withdrawal. That's why you fear being alone. Not because you dislike silence, but because silence shows you how empty the noise really was. But the cure isn't dramatic. It's quiet. You don't need to escape the world. Just turn down its volume. Spend an hour without speaking, an evening without the phone, a day without performing. At first, you'll feel restless, like something's missing. That's the addiction screaming. But give it time, and the fog lifts. Your thoughts sharpen. Your emotions settle. Your instincts return. The mind, left in peace, heals itself. And that's what Schopenhauer meant when he said that solitude purifies the intellect. Because in silence, the mind doesn't just rest, it rebuilds. You've seen what the noise does. You've felt it. The exhaustion, the dull ache behind the smile, the slow erosion of who you really are. But this is where the path splits, where the ordinary mind dissolves, and the philosophical mind is born. Schopenhauer wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone." That sentence isn't isolation, it's liberation. It means that solitude isn't about rejecting people. It's about reclaiming your territory, your mind, your thoughts, your internal world. Great thinkers all understood this law. Nietzsche walked alone through the Alps for hours every day. His ideas were born in silence, not debate. Leonardo da Vinci withdrew from the courts of Milan to sketch birds and study the anatomy of movement. Carl Jung locked himself away in a stone tower by a lake. He built it with his own hands, brick by brick, to think without interruption. They weren't escaping the world. They were protecting their originality from it. You have that same power, but you've been conditioned to fear it. You've been told solitude is unhealthy, antisocial, selfish, that it's better to blend in than to think alone. But every man who ever rose above the herd had to step away from it first. You don't need to vanish. You need to withdraw with precision, to build borders around your mind, the way an emperor guards his kingdom. Choose silence the way a warrior chooses his weapon. Because silence isn't emptiness, it's protection. It's the filter that keeps your thoughts pure, your focus sharp, your emotions your own. Solitude doesn't mean hating people. It means loving your mind enough to give it space. It's not misanthropy, it's management, mental territory management. You decide who gets access. You decide when to engage. You decide when to disappear. And when you do, something strange happens. The world starts to chase you. People are drawn to what they can't easily reach. They sense the difference, the groundedness, the depth, the stillness. Because in a sea of noise, silence feels like power. That's the philosopher's escape, not running away from society, but rising above its gravity. The crowd will never stop talking, but you can stop listening. When you master selective connection, when you learn to protect your time, your focus, and your inner silence, you become untouchable. You stop reacting, stop performing, stop needing. And in that stillness, something awakens. The version of you that was always there, waiting to think freely again. You don't owe the world your constant presence. You owe yourself your undivided mind. This is where the weak version of you dies, the version that needed noise, that sought approval, that mistook connection for identity. You've seen how mimicry drains your originality, how the crowd feeds on your energy, how dopamine rewards you for obedience. You've watched yourself shrink, bend, soften, until your mind no longer felt like your own. But now you understand. It wasn't weakness, it was conditioning, and conditioning can be broken. When you withdraw, when you embrace solitude not as punishment, but as purification, something happens. The voices fade, the pressure dissolves, and what's left is terrifying at first, because it's real. For the first time, you begin to hear your own mind, not the echoes of others, not the recycled phrases or borrowed emotions, but your actual thoughts. At first they come quietly, unsure, fragile. But as the noise dies, they grow louder, clearer, sharper, until one day you realize you no longer crave being understood. You crave being undisturbed. That's when the transformation begins. Because a mind that no longer depends on social approval becomes unreadable, and what can't be read can't be controlled. Schopenhauer knew this power. He didn't isolate himself to escape the world. He did it to dominate it, silently. He understood that when your happiness is self-sustaining, you become terrifying to those who need others to exist. You are no longer a product of conversations. You are a fortress of thought. You speak less, but every word cuts deeper. You share less, but everything you reveal carries weight. You don't chase, you draw, you don't explain, you command silence. This is what society fears most. A man who cannot be manipulated through shame or praise. A mind that doesn't flinch when ignored. A person who walks away from the crowd without looking back. You become unreachable, not because you're hiding, but because you've ascended. You've detached from the invisible strings that pull most people. And in that detachment, you discover the highest form of freedom, indifference. The power they tried to drain from you, through mimicry, through conformity, through noise, returns, stronger, calmer, unshakable. You don't belong to the world anymore. The world now orbits around you. That is the birth of the unreachable mind, the rare, silent force society can't define, predict, or destroy. Now you know what they never wanted you to discover. That silence isn't emptiness, it's mastery. The world worships expression. It teaches you to share everything, your thoughts, your emotions, your fears, as if transparency equals truth. But the truth doesn't scream, it whispers. And only the disciplined mind hears it. From this point forward, your silence is not withdrawal, it's strategy. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain. You don't need to speak just to fill the void. You log off not because you're tired of people, but because you've outgrown them. You stop answering every message because peace is more valuable than constant connection. You stop chasing understanding because only a few deserve to hear what your mind has become. Every time you hold back your words, you sharpen your presence. Every time you sit alone, you reclaim another fragment of power. Every moment of silence becomes a weight that others can feel, an energy that commands without sound. This is the discipline of silence, the final law of strength. Because real thinkers aren't loud, they're precise. They speak when it matters and disappear when it doesn't. So, perform your first ritual, close the tab, Turn off the phone. Let the noise starve for your attention. Sit in the stillness that frightens everyone else, and let it rebuild you. If this video spoke to you, it's not because you were entertained. It's because something inside you recognized the truth. You've always known you were different. You just forgot why. Remember it now. Protect it. Live it. You don't need their world anymore. You have your own. And in that silence, you've already won.